In an era when kings and nobles ruled Europe, how did a small community of farmers on Germany's North Sea coast defy feudalism and stay independent for centuries? From the 1200s until 1559, the peasants of Dithmarschen formed an autonomous republic, a marshland democracy squeezed between the powerful Elbe and Eider rivers. Historians have long been fascinated by this region, where common farmers, not nobles, successfully resisted conquest by wealthier, better equipped feudal powers. The story of Dithmarschen's peasant republic reveals a remarkable blend of the power of geography, unity, liberty, and sheer determination against the repressive forces of the feudal order. The unique political status of Dithmarschen didn't emerge overnight. It was the result of historical circumstance and persistent resistance to outside rule. In the Middle Ages, the territory officially belonged to the Prince Archbishopric of Bremen. However, the local peasants grew used to being granted significant autonomy, making them a somewhat unruly bunch when the Prince Archbishop tried to impose his will on them. A particular episode in 1187 and 1188 illustrates their resolve. Prince Archbishop Hartwig II of Bremen invaded to subjugate Dithmarschen and force the farmers to pay dues. The Dithmarschers agreed to his demands until the occupying army withdrew. After the withdrawal, they promptly reneged and refused the tribute, openly denying the bishop's claims to authority over them. Unable to afford a second campaign after this clever ruse, Hartwig had to abandon his conquest, leaving the peasants effectively self-governing. Over the next century, Dithmarschen further consolidated its freedom. A turning point came in 1227 during the Battle of Bornhoved, a major conflict between Danish royal forces and local German lords. The men of Dithmarschen had been compelled to fight alongside the Danes, but in the heat of battle they switched sides and joined the Count of Holstein. This contributed to a Danish defeat, and the Danes were forced to relinquish their conquest of Dithmarschen. In the aftermath, no external lord firmly and directly controlled Dithmarschen, though it was still legally claimed by the Archbishopric of Bremen. The farmers acknowledged only the distant Holy Roman Emperor, if anyone, as overlord, and the Holy Roman Emperor appears to have paid them little mind. By the late 13th and early 14th century, the region was essentially a self-governing community of villages, protected by its difficult marsh terrain and the tenacity of its inhabitants. Throughout the 14th and 15th centuries, the peasants of Dithmarschen repeatedly thwarted attempts by neighboring princes to bring them to heel. In 1319, Count Gerhard III of Holstein invaded with knights to enforce his rule. The Dithmarscher militia cleverly lured the knights into their local swamplands, where the militia slaughtered 2,000 knights, as well as 14 feudal lords. This marked the beginning of the Dithmarschers' penchant for absolutely annihilating vastly superior feudal forces. This absolute destruction of a feudal army by local peasants meant that it would be nearly a century before anyone tried to mess with the Dithmarschers again. But eventually memories fade, and another invasion came in 1403, this time led by Albert II of Holstein, who claimed the area was rightfully his. That campaign also ended in failure, and this time the peasant militia decided to ramp things up a bit and slay this invading lord as well as his troops. These victories against advanced knightly armies of the High Middle Ages enhanced the peasants' confidence in their military capabilities. Recognizing common interests, the free farmers even aligned with external allies when convenient. In 1468, Dithmarschen forged an alliance with the Hanseatic city of Lübeck to cooperate on trade and to counter the spread of feudal control in the region. This pact bolstered commerce by allowing Dithmarschen to trade with all the wealthy port towns and cities in the Hanseatic network. But perhaps most importantly, it also confirmed that the peasant republic was regarded as a political entity in its own right by other powers. Even the Holy Roman Emperor arguably acknowledged Dithmarschen's peculiar status, at least on paper. In 1473, Emperor Frederick III officially incorporated Dithmarschen into the Duchy of Holstein and granted it as a fief to King Christian I of Denmark. In theory, this meant Dithmarschen now belonged to the Danish crown. In reality, however, the Danish kings found it impossible to enforce their rule there. But before we get into what has been called the finest hour of European peasantry, let's take a moment to discuss just what the internal workings of this peasant republic looked like. Prior to the 15th century, we have little hard evidence as to how this polity actually made decisions, though historians hypothesize that ad hoc meetings were held to discuss pressing issues. This had all changed by the middle of the 15th century when the communal governance of Dithmarschen became more structured. According to local tradition, the farmers in northern Dithmarschen started meeting in 1447 in an open field to discuss political matters. These gatherings gradually evolved into a representative council that included delegates from the various districts of Dithmarschen. Eventually, this body formalized as the Council of 48, comprising 48 men who were chosen from among the most prominent and capable peasants to govern the country. These 48 men were effectively the magistrates and decision-makers of Dithmarschen's republic. In principle, they were elected by the common folk, and any male farmer could be elected. That said, in practice they generally, though not always, came from the wealthiest farming families. Over time, this elite group of farmers formed a kind of quasi-aristocracy within Dithmarschen, dominating the council and guiding the republic's policies. However, it's important to remember that despite having some hereditary elements in leadership, serfdom and feudalism were entirely absent in the peasant republic. All Dithmarschers were free farmers, and even if political power was in the hands of a few, every farmer enjoyed personal freedom and private land ownership, a rarity in medieval Europe. Dithmarschen even developed written laws for itself, with their own basic constitution. By the late 15th century, Dithmarschen had all the hallmarks of an organized republic, if only on a small scale. It had a code of laws, a council of representatives, and regular assemblies to decide matters of war, justice, and policy. Socially, Dithmarschen in this era was quite egalitarian compared to other regions. The population was organized in large extended families, which some have compared to clans, and which formed the backbone of society. These communities worked together in remarkable solidarity. They undertook large-scale cooperative projects that were essential for survival on the harsh marshland. For example, the Dithmarschers collectively built and maintained levees and drainage canals to hold back the North Sea and reclaim arable land from the swamps. And trust me, you're going to want to keep these levees in mind, because they're about to play a very important role in the story of this republic. Such infrastructure required communal effort and mutual trust, and it strengthened the bonds among the free peasants. The strong communal spirit also had a military dimension. When threatened, the farmers could swiftly raise a militia drawn from all the parishes, with each family contributing men to fight. These citizen soldiers weren't the poorly equipped and trained peasant levies you may be expecting from a peasant republic. In battle, these peasant fighters displayed a high degree of discipline and knowledge of local terrain, often compensating for their lack of heavy arms or cavalry. Dithmarschen essentially had a citizen militia instead of knights, a fighting force of farmers that proved effective in defending the republic's independence. Religion, too, was handled in a characteristically independent way. The Dithmarschers managed their own church affairs with little outside interference even prior to the Protestant Reformation. Perhaps due to this history of significant independence from the Catholic Church, they were quick to embrace Protestantism when the time came. In short, governance in Dithmarschen was carried out by the community and for the community. Significant emphasis was placed on local decision-making, communal responsibility, and freedom from feudal exploitation. The economy of Dithmarschen was based on the resources of its coastal marshland and the industriousness of its people. Agriculture was the primary sector. The region's marshy but fertile soil, once drained, was excellent for growing grain and raising livestock. Cows and sheep thrived on the rich grass of the region, and the free farmers produced butter, cheese, wool, and meat, not only for subsistence, but also for sale. Without feudal landlords taking a cut, the peasants enjoyed the fruits of their labor to a greater degree than most medieval farmers. This helped Dithmarschen attain a reputation as a modest though prosperous region. It sent delegates to the Hanseatic Diets and enjoyed trading privileges, though the Hanseatic cities maintained that peasant merchants were not the equals of wealthy city-dwelling merchants. With all that said, let's discuss the highlight of the history of the Peasant Republic and how these liberty-loving Germans were finally crushed under the weight of the feudal system. The most celebrated military triumph of Dithmarschen was the Battle of Hemmingstedt in 1500. By the end of the 15th century, the Danish royals, who also ruled the nearby Duchy of Holstein, were determined to bring Dithmarschen under control once and for all. King Hans of Denmark and his brother Frederick mustered a large army of over 10,000 men to invade and crush the peasant republic. Their forces included noble cavalry and landsknecht mercenaries, as well as artillery. In February 1500, this army advanced into Dithmarschen, expecting to crush the peasant defenders with ease. The Dithmarschers, led by a capable farmer commander named Wolf Isebrand, resorted to shrewd tactics and took advantage of their home terrain. On 17th February 1500, at a village called Hemmingstedt, the decisive battle took place. The invaders found themselves funneled onto a narrow road flanked by flooded fields and levees. In a stroke of strategic brilliance, the Dithmarscher defenders opened the levees, releasing ice-cold water onto the flat land and turning the ground into impassable mud. A sudden sleet storm blew into the attackers' faces, blinding them and dampening their gunpowder. Amid this chaos, the lightly equipped peasant infantry waded through the marshy waters and fell upon the disoriented enemy. Despite being severely outnumbered and under-equipped, the Dithmarschers fought ferociously and routed the Danish and Holstein troops. The Battle of Hemmingstedt ended in an astounding victory for the Peasant Republic. The peasant militia slaughtered 7,000 of their foes while losing an estimated 60 men, despite being outnumbered nearly 2-1 and facing an army largely composed of nobles and professionals. News of the battle spread across Europe, as it was unheard of for common farmers to defeat a knightly army with cannons. Hemmingstedt entered legend as a symbol of underdog resistance. The peasants of Dithmarschen had preserved their freedom against one of the most powerful nobles of the north. For generations, and until the present day, Dithmarschen's people continue to celebrate the memory of Hemmingstedt as the high point of their history. The crushing victory secured Dithmarschen's autonomy for another half-century, but eventually a new generation of rulers would succeed where King Hans had failed. The final chapter came in 1559 with a conflict known as the Last Feud. By that time, King Frederick II had ascended the Danish throne, and along with his German ducal relatives, saw an opportunity to conquer Dithmarschen once and for all. In June 1559, a joint Danish-Holstein force invaded the region, again with overwhelming numbers. Unfortunately for the liberty-loving citizens of Dithmarschen, the peasant republic couldn't repeat the miracles of the past. After a brief and violent campaign, the towns of Dithmarschen fell one by one, and the farmers were forced to submit and dissolve the Council of 48. The tale of Dithmarschen's peasant republic continues to fascinate and serve as a reminder that even in the feudal era, common folk could sometimes chart their own destinies against all odds. Also, if you like this video, Be sure to check out one of these other videos, which the algorithm thinks you'll love.